Welcome back to the Plan Your Federal Retirement podcast. My name's Christian Sakamoto, filling in for Micah today. And with me today is another advisor, John Raleigh. John, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey, Christian. It's very neat to be able to talk from across the country like we do. So this is great.
I know. And we were chit-chatting earlier and you're telling me it's somewhere in the 80s, maybe pushing 90. And I'm just sitting here getting a little bit colder here in Washington, which I know is nowhere near how cold it is in Alaska. So we kind of pick our battles there. But
Yep.
Excited to be talking today about the TSP. And we're recording this sort of in the beginning of the November 2024 year. So we're talking about what things to be thinking about for the beginning of the year for 2025, right? We think the TSP is a powerful tool, and we want to make sure you have some of those tips and tricks to start the year off right. I would say just right off the bat, the contribution limit has increased for 2025. And every single year, it's been going up a little bit. It increased another $500 for the year. So the contribution maximum would be $23,500 if you're under the age of 50. That translates to $903 a pay period. Now, if you're over 50, we get the extra $7,500, or if you're 50 and over, you get the extra catch up, which is an additional $7,500, bringing the total contribution limit for the TSP up to $31,000 for 2025 for those who are 50 and over. That would be $1,192 per pay period if you're 50 and over. So right off the bat, there's some increases there. Let's take advantage of them. I always think that's a good plan to try to maximize our retirement contributions. Isn't that right, John?
Absolutely right. And of course, Christian, you'd be doing the lesser amount. I'd be doing the greater amount. But it's really, really a powerful piece to be doing. So yeah, I think that's there. So I mean, that's definitely the case.
Yeah. And I would say too, if we're not quite at that level to be able to max it, totally fine. I get that. I always try to increase contributions just a little bit every year with clients, trying to, maybe it's just increments of 20, 50, maybe $100 extra to try to just push ourselves to saving a little bit more. So the bare minimum that you should be contributing though to the TSP, how much would you say would be the bare minimum, John, to the TSP?
Definitely. The one thing people seem to forget is you have a 5% match that you have available. So if you miss that by yourself and you do not put in at least the 5%, you're giving away free money. So in the back of your mind, that should be a basis. But like you just said prior, I think the ultimate goal, especially if you're younger, is to do the best you can to max it out, because it's reducing your income as best as possible. And it's also helping give the money time to grow. The compounding effect of money is incredible. And I've told the story, and it wasn't a TSP that they used, but I had a client that when mutual funds first came out in the 30s, he started investing because his wife made him go to a seminar.
Yeah.
And they started by putting $5 a month away. And by the time he retired, and the only additional money they added was every time they got a raise, they put a little more in it. They went through a long period of times of ups and downs. And when he retired, there was over $1.4 million in that account that they had never paid attention to. They had just put the money away. So the TSP gives you that same sort of option there to be able to save. Starting is 5% for sure, but maxing it out as best as possible that you can do is extremely powerful and will help you be very successful when you retire.
Yeah. So definitely the minimum is putting in 5% to get that 5% match. Of course, don't just stop there. Try to encourage yourself to save a little bit more every single year to get closer to that maximum contribution limit. And that just talks about the power of the compounding interest, which so many people talk about, but it's so important, especially if you're getting started and you're earlier in your career. The dollars that you're putting in have so much more gravitas because of compounding interest, right? As opposed to as we get closer and closer to retirement, one of the things that we talk about and share with clients is it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market, right? Time in the market. So if you have decades of time for your TSP to continue to grow until you start actually pulling from it, who cares if there's a downturn in the market, right? We know that there's going to be ups and downs as time goes on, but if we look out at another 10, 15, 20, 30 year time horizon, what's the value of the market going to be? It's going to be higher, right? So that's the other thing to be thinking about.
And on the flip side of that, Christian, if you're talking about we don't have the time, that's no reason not to do it either. What you have to remember is every dollar you're putting in, unless it's going into the Roth, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but if it goes into your TSP, your traditional TSP, you will then have that money will be put in pre-tax dollars, which is powerful because technically what you're doing is you're investing more than what you'd be able to do outside of the TSP in a non-qualified situation or a different taxable situation. So because of that, it makes sense to really pay attention. And even if you didn't do it and you're older like me, it still makes sense to do the best you can to get the money in there because that tax saving and giving that a piece of time to be able to compound will make a huge difference also.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is kind of a double-edged sword there because more recent changes to the TSP over the years have now included Roth contributions, which back in the day, that wasn't an option. And now that we have the option for Roth, I would say, to your point, John, yes, the traditional is awesome to get that tax deferral. But we have to think about your taxes when we're also doing our planning for how much to put into the TSP and retirement accounts as well. Because if we think taxes are going up in the future, and today we're putting in and getting the deferral and we're doing it pre-tax into the traditional TSP, but we think taxes might be going up in the future, or maybe our tax bracket would be going up in the future. Might want to rethink that strategy, right, John? Because then we maybe we want to pay the taxes today knowing that they might be going up in the future. Or the other myth I see is, well, I think my taxes will be going down in the future. I don't think I'll be making as much money in retirement. So do you have clients that maybe have brought that concern up or that idea up that they think their taxes might be going down in the future?
It's so
in retirement?
interesting. And I've been blessed being in Florida to work around retirees now for over 30 years, actually. And when people are taking money out, they're taking it out and trying in the most tax-wise situation. And if you have all your money in the traditional TSP, that means that your taxes are going to be at a certain rate because everything you do is taxable. Having the power of the Roth and like that will make sense because we don't know what taxes are going to be in the future. The big myth is, though, if you work so hard through your lifetime to get to retirement and you think you're going to spend less money in retirement, what that does is that means you're moving into a declining or a reduced lifestyle than what you're used to now. And I will tell you, there's a piece there that makes it very, very frustrating because here you worked your whole life for this particular lifestyle that you're looking to go to, and you think you're going to spend less money, but a lot of the spending just changes on what you're spending it on as you go to retire. And really, when you're planning for this and you're putting these tools together like the TSP that are so strong, it makes sense to make sure you understand that if you want a lifestyle similar to what you're living right now, you're probably going to need a similar amount of money. And that means where does that money come from is going to be so important.
Right. And so, not to hit the nail on the head too much, but the way that we can contribute to the TSP is just something to revisit. If we've only been doing the traditional contributions to the TSP, getting pre-tax, this might be a time where we reconsider and reevaluate. If we just flip the switch and go full Roth contribution, and forever we've been doing a deferred contribution, and now we're going to flip to do Roth, we're going to have to address those tax withholdings as well, because you're going to have that much more taxable income for the year because you're not going to get the deduction. So that's another tip there. If we are going to be contributing to the Roth and you think that makes a lot of sense, make sure you reevaluate your tax withholdings as well to make up for that additional income that's going to show up on your tax return.
That's that old adage, pay me now or pay me later. I mean, and
Right.
that's what it does. Making sure you're doing what's best for you and your family is key. And
Right.
understanding that there's going to be a point in time you're going to need to live off this money, or it's going to help your lifestyle be what you want it to be, if possible. Then you need to make sure you have those pieces in place for you.
Right. Another thing that we always talk about here on the podcast, but also with clients, is just our general investment rules and principles that we want to put in place. The biggest rule that you've heard us talk about is the 5-year rule with money. that any money that you plan to spend in the next 5 years, we don't want that to be in the stock market. And so, as I was hinting at earlier, if you have a time horizon between now and 5 years from now where you're still working, right? We're not retiring in the next 5 years. We might consider having more of our money in the CS&I funds inside the TSP, or more in the higher life cycle funds that are then made up of the CNS&I and GNF. But making sure that our time horizon allows for more of that growth. But as we get closer and closer to that retirement window, if we're within 5 years of retirement, we want to start building up our cash reserves. We want to start building up what our fixed income would be. And inside the TSP, that would be the G fund and then the F fund. So as like I said, we're recording this in the beginning of the November 2024, record highs with the stock market. And this is a good time to just be taking a look at this, taking a look at how your accounts are allocated between the 5 core funds, the G fund, the F fund, the CS&I. And maybe it's time where we take a look to see if we need to make any adjustments. And when we call this rebalancing, right? Maybe we have too much in the growth. Maybe we have too little in growth. And we just want to look at this time of year to make any adjustments for the following year.
And that's so important, because if you're out of balance for what your tolerance is for the ups and downs of the market, the being out of balance can actually have you taking more chances than you'd like to take. The flip side of it is you also have to remember, as advisors, I know, Christian, we assume life. I mean, we hope, and a lot of the calculations are now telling us to calculate to 115, because that's what this new generation is going to live in, those sort of things. And I will tell you, as long as I've been in the business, when I first started with retirees, you retired at 65 and you were dead by 75. So how much money did you really have to have set aside? Because you were only thinking about a 10-year window. Now it can be 30, it can be 40 years that you're retired, if not more. So in your balancing and in your thinking, the tools you have in the TSP are there, but there's always should be some money out there in the stocks. Reason being is we have to assume you're going to live. And how are you going to maintain your purchasing power? How are you going to keep refilling the buckets for the next 1 to 3 and 4 to 4 or 5 years? Those sort of pieces there to make sure that you're able to keep living the life that you're accustomed to.
One of the mistakes that I see as a financial advisor after federal employees go to retire is not understanding how it's different when you're in accumulation mode, saving money for retirement, building your TSP, to you're in the distribution mode, pulling money out of the TSP. Sometimes we think that we can manage everything the same. Then it comes to retirement and all of a sudden we have this flood of different types of emotions. And it normally happens to people that generally aren't emotional about investments. And if you are, it happens to you even more. So we put together a guide for you, a free guide, in order to help know what questions you need to ask, know what learning lessons are out there, and how should you build a proper distribution plan with your TSP. This is so important because how you got here in order to be able to retire is not how you're going to stay retired. There are some differences that we need to keep in mind. And most importantly, we have to come up with a plan that not if, when the market goes down for a long period of time. How do we stay dispassionate investors? How do we hold for the long run, but have a plan that you won't run out of money? In order to get your free guide, jump on our website at planyourfederalretirement.com/TSP after retirement. That's planyourfederalretirement.com/TSP after retirement. Take control of your retirement savings. Get this guide so you can make smarter decisions about your retirement. So then, happy planning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really the point I made earlier about not timing the market, but time in the market. So if you look at your TSP allocations right now and you're like, you know what, I think I have maybe a little too much in the safe side between the G fund and the F fund. And we say, hey, I think I should have a little bit more in growth. You might think, well, the market's as high as it's been. It's record highs right now. Maybe this isn't the best time to go in. So then we delay doing that. And 6 months later, it's higher. And then 6 months later, it's higher. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm just saying it's easy to get in the mode that I'll just buy it when it goes down. When's it going down? And did that already happen and now it's on its way up? That's the big question mark, is timing the market. And how many times is that effective? Not often. Not often that people get that and nail it right. So if we find ourselves in a position right now where we need to move a little bit in, one of the strategies that we've talked about before and with clients is to dollar cost average some of that money in. So one of the things I love about the TSP is the fact that we can dollar cost average every 2 weeks from our paychecks in and be buying into the market or into the G and F fund. We can do the same thing with our rebalancing approach. So if we know we need to move X amount of dollars from the G fund back into the market, we don't have to do that all at once. We can do that over a period of months, over a period of time, to sort of spread out the risk that we might be buying at the high. And I like that to take that approach when it comes to that rebalancing, is maybe we think about dollar cost averaging if we need to move more money in.
Dollar cost averaging is powerful. It doesn't work all the time, but for what you have available with your TSP, it is extremely powerful. And it simply means that when you put money in systematically, if the market's up, you buy less shares of what you're buying because then you cost more. And if the market's down, you buy more shares when the market's there. And I don't know about you, Christian, but I know if I go into the supermarket and something's BOGO, because we have a lot of those down here in Florida, buy one, get one free as you're coming in, and it's something we use regularly, I will tend to buy it just because, so we have it, because technically I'm buying it at half off. Conversely, if it's not BOGO, unless I need it, I'm not going to buy it because I don't want to spend the additional money. Dollar cost averaging gives us the exact same pattern there. When the market's down, you're buying more. When the market's up, you're buying less. And ultimately, it lets you get more money or the same money invested more efficiently compared to what it would do as if you just were lump summing money in.
Right. Because as we're focused on the amount of shares that we're buying, essentially, not the price of which we're buying it at.
That's correct. Yeah. And systematically investing.
Right. Well, another thing to talk about too, I hinted at this, was the life cycle funds. So I think these are a pretty good strategy for clients and for those listening to the podcast. The life cycle funds, we have the L Income Fund, we have the L 2025, the L 2030, and it goes up in 5-year increments. I think the latest one is maybe L 2070. The whole premise is designed for the whole idea of a life cycle fund is the year in which you plan to retire, that's the fund that you choose to have your investments to be allocated between the 5 core funds. The life cycle doesn't include any more funds than the G, F, C, S, and I. It just has a way to reallocate them depending on your time horizon for needing that money. That all sounds awesome. That all makes sense. And if we look at some of those L 2070 funds, L 2060 funds, most of it, if not, I'm not going to say all of it, but most of it's just in the CS and I funds because there's so much time between now and actually spending that money and taking distributions from it. But something happens when we get closer and closer to the actual year in which we are right now. So if we look at like the 2030 fund or the L 2025 fund, John, what are you seeing there as that gets closer and closer to the year that we plan to retire?
Unfortunately, those funds, the closer you get, seem to take into account that all your money is in one basket. And if you go back to us with our bucket system and saying, okay, how much money is going to be used over the next 2 years? How many is going to be used for year 3, 4? And then how much is going to be there at 5 years plus? Well, the closer you get to retirement, the 2025 fund and like that, the more and more money goes to the G and the F funds and the more conservative funds. And while if you're looking at your investments in one big package, that can make a lot of sense. If you're looking at your investments on what's right for you, it really is counterintuitive to our philosophy, saying that the longer term money needs to be allowed to grow so that you can keep pace with inflation and we can maintain that lifestyle that you're looking to through your life. Now, there's no guarantees, but that is a powerful way to do it. And when you run through a market run like we've had the past couple of years, and you're in one of the life cycle funds that's 5 or a little bit more years away from the the due date or the date that it's shooting for, you're actually losing out on all that potential growth during that time because of
Right.
the way it's allocated.
Now, if the market was down, then you'd say, well, good timing, right? It just happened to be that good timing. But again, we're not trying to time the market with
No,
this. One
no.
of the things we say about the L cycle funds is I'm a big fan. I just think they get too conservative too quickly. So if you find yourself where you aren't super savvy with investments and you just want to find a fund that works, the life cycle funds can be a good option. But we just have to pay attention to the fact that, again, I think they get a little too conservative too quickly. So I just took a screenshot and looked at the L 2025 fund, for example. This would assume that people in the year 2025 are planning to retire. So people thinking about retiring, next year. If we look at it, the G fund has about 63, almost 64%, and the F fund is 5, almost 6%. So that's like 70% of your money that's outside of the stock market, and then the rest is in the CS and I funds. That might be relative to your individual and unique financial goals and retirement goals. That might be the right strategy, but I find that just in general, that ends up being a little bit too conservative for our retirement portfolio. Again, you might be unique. You might think that, or maybe your retirement income needs are different. Therefore, you can take on less risk, less money and growth. But I just think that might be a little bit too conservative. If we push it out to the L 2030 fund, this one has about 34% in G, 5 to 6 in F. So that one becomes about 40% out of the market and 60 that is in the market. So even that 2030 fund, that's 6 years away, 5 years away from retirement. Remember that 5-year rule with money. If we're planning on retiring within 5 years, we want to make sure we've got some money set aside. This one's got 40% of your money outside of the stock market. Maybe that's right. Again, as I said, but we just have to pay attention to, if we're going to use those life cycle funds, just how conservative they get over time.
And paying attention to how close you are to your retirement and taking that money out. Because there's nothing wrong with getting more conservative the closer you get to retirement. I understand it
Not at all.
totally.
Yeah.
The thing you have to remember, though, is when you're saving for retirement, it's very different than you're withdrawing money during retirement. And those lifestyle funds do a wonderful job helping you get to retirement. The closer they get, though, the more it becomes an issue because you've got to learn to transition how to take the money out. And
Right.
they may not be the best source there for you. But it's just another tool you have available. And if you want to do all the research, it's probably better to use the non-life cycle funds. If
Right.
you don't want to do the research, that's fine. Then use them.
Yeah. Or maybe you work with an advisor like ourselves that we can help you pick out the right allocations for you, if that's the case and if that's the direction you wanted to go. John, anything else on the TSP side before we wrap up this pod?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered pretty much a lot of what we thought we were going to be going through. Yeah, I can't think of it. It's a wonderful tool. I mean, it's an extremely powerful tool. I wish for my clients that are outside of the federal system that they had available similar sort of tools like this, because it really allows you to do powerful things. And I think every Fed should be taking advantage of this fully.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we combine this with the pension, I mean, that's a dynamite retirement plan. Plus keeping health insurance, it's so good.
Yep.
If we look outside, if we look in different companies in the private space, sure, they might have a 401k or a 403b, but oftentimes it's not combined with the pension. So
Right.
I always like to remind our feds how good of a deal they have on their retirement.
Well, they've worked hard for it. They've put up with a lot of frustrations at times, and it is
Yeah.
a wonderful system that they have in place for sure.
Yep. Well, as you know, this podcast is all about taking action. So we've been talking about the TSP today. The first action item that I would have would be review your current TSP, pull up this most recent statement. I would just log in online and see where it is at today to see the current allocation and make sure it's set up to meet your needs. Maybe we need to rebalance. Again, maybe we have too much in growth, CS and I, or maybe we have too much in the G and the F. It's a good time of the year to be looking at rebalancing the TSP.
making sure you're comfortable with how the money is placed based on what your needs are. That's definitely very important.
What's another action item, John, for our listeners today?
Make sure you're taking advantage of that 5% that's available to you. It's money you give away if you don't. And I know, I love it when I have a discussion with individuals that have the match available and they're not using it. You ask why they're not using it, and they don't think about it. I would like, well, write me a check for the 5% then, if it's not that important to you. It's free money. Why not take advantage of it? It's going to help you get to your goals quicker.
Well, last couple action items, I'd say, because we're talking about the TSP, review those TSP beneficiaries. On your quarterly statement, they've now added it back that it lists beneficiaries. I was just reviewing some with our recent meetings with clients, and a few of them still had that yellow triangle saying no beneficiaries are listed. And there was a recent change where it went from, paper to digital, and there was a change on the TSP website, and they've lost lots and lots of beneficiaries as a result of that switch. So just a good time to be reviewing beneficiaries. And as always, leave us a like. Make sure you're downloading our podcast. Our goal is to impact another 1 million federal employees plan their federal retirement. So we couldn't do this without you. All right, John, this was a lot of fun. So until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.